Hi, I'm Dr. Dorothy Armstrong and I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been working on the Sensibility project over the last year. One of the results of the project is an amazing collection of toys that you can borrow for children with additional needs. And the clip that I'm making today is about handwriting, because I know how stressful handwriting can be for many young children. And I wanted to show you some of the pieces from the collection that might help with that. So if we start by thinking about handwriting, we often think about the hand and we begin there, but it's actually very important that we begin with how the person is sitting, because it's a bit like a tree. The trunk of a tree needs to be stable in order to hold the branches and all the wonderful creatures that land in those branches. And if you think about that, and think about handwriting, it's pretty much the same. So when you have your child doing their homework at home, think about where they're sitting. Ideally, they need to be able to sit so that their hips and their knees are at a 90-degree angle and their feet are flat on the ground. Now, if that isn't possible in your house, then maybe get some books and things that go under the feet so that the feet are stable. So once they're sitting correctly, you might find that they're a little bit wobbly and they're not able to hold that position. That might be because they've got weak core muscle strength. So one thing that can really help with that is this first piece I want to show you here, and it's called a seated wedge. And it's placed exactly like that in the chair. And when the child sits in that, they're more stable and they're able to hold the seated posture a little longer. The beauty of the seated wedge is also that you can move a tiny bit on it. So for a child who needs to fidget and move, that's doing a couple of different things. It's helping them have a nice sitting posture, but it's also allowing for a little bit of movement. And you'll see how I've pumped it there. That's important. Don't over pump that. If that's pumped too much, you need a lot of balance to sit in it. So it needs to have a little bit of give, pretty much just like it is there in the chair. So this is just to show you how to get your child to sit for handwriting. You'll notice that my back is firmly against the back of the chair. That's important. My hips are at 90, my knees are at 90, and my feet are flat on the ground. And I'm using the little seated slope to help with posture. So the first thing you're thinking is, how is my child sitting? Now the next thing you need to think about is the arm and the wrist. What's very difficult is if the wrist turns in or curls in, that can produce a lot of pain along here and here, which can make them even more frustrated about their handwriting, because if it hurts, you're not going to want to do it. So if you find your child's wrist is curling in, you want to encourage the wrist to extend outwards. And that's where this piece you might borrow, and this is a writing slope. So the writing slope is a little bit like the old-fashioned desks because it's at a slope. And once it's at a slope, when you're writing, your wrist has to come up into extension for writing. And that's a good practice. That makes almost a little, what we call a little schema in the brain, or a little way of handwriting in the brain where the wrist is coming up like this. So it's important when you get your writing slope that the little Dyson dots are on the bottom, and try your best not to lose those, because without those little Dyson buttons, the writing slope is going to move all over the table, causing more frustration for the child. Now the beauty of the writing slope for a child maybe with DCD dyspraxia who might be a little disorganized, they can actually put all their books under that slope, so it can help with organization as well. And I know myself as mum to two now adult young people with DCD dyspraxia, when they were children we had this and they customized it. They had Doctor Who stickers and all sorts of stickers on it, and it was fantastic. So that's important, because when the child comes in with something different, you got to own it and you got to have confidence with it and bring it in, and almost want everyone else in the class to want it as well. And you can do that, you can carry it off. So now we're thinking of the hand itself. So with the hand, if we think about the pencil, the best way to hold your pencil is in a tripod grip like that. So we have the pointer to the front, the thumb underneath, and the middle finger. The pencil is resting on the little finger. The reason for that is it's easier. The little muscles, there's loads of little muscles in your hand and they can strain. So if you're writing like this, again, you can get a lot of pain down here. So we want them writing like this. Now, Sometimes we give children pencils far too young, and if you give them a pencil far too young, their little hands don't have the strength to hold it, and they can develop all sorts of unusual ways to hold the pencil. And then young people with things like DCD dyspraxia also have difficulties holding the pencil, and we tend to see a thumb wrap grip. So after the age of about 8, it's incredibly difficult to change a handwriting grip because it's formed a little schema in your brain. So it's in your brain rather than in your hand. But before the age of 8, we might try and change the handwriting grip. I'm not saying you can't afterwards, but I want you to know how stressful that might be for your young person. So if we're going from a thumb wrap grip, one of the best ways to help the child learn a new way to hold the pen is with this. These are called claw grips. You might change the name of that for your child in case if they don't like that word. You can change it to whatever you like. And there's 2 different sizes. You've got a little one and you've got a big one depending on the child's hand size. So let me show you the big one. So the first thing you do is, you see it's got 3 little hats. So put the pencil in the same direction as the hats point. See? That's important. Now, when you're using the pencil, put your hand like this, the webs of the hand apart, and put the pencil in the web space between the thumb and the index like this. And then what you're doing is, you can see here, one of the little hats has a T on it. So I know I put my thumb in there, my index goes there, and my middle finger goes, it rests. So now look, I've got a lovely little tripod grip, and it's easy because my fingers are resting in their little hats. So that's a lot easier than me doing it myself. So you might use that for the child for a while until the little muscles get a bit stronger and the brain has learned a new way to hold the pencil. And don't go from that down to that because it's too big a jump. What you might want to try next is what we call a crossover grip, which is this one. And with the crossover grip, again, we put the pencil in like this, and we've got a thumb on one side, the index on the other, and again, the middle finger resting at the bottom. And there's a place for all the little fingers, and the thumb can't come over because it's resting in that little groove there in that space. And again, once the child gets used to the less support than this and has moved on to this support and is doing quite well, we then might want to shift them to this one. Something like this. And again, it tells the child where to put their fingers, but it's less supportive to that thumb. So we've got something similar there, but the thumb could come over if it wanted to, but hopefully it won't at that point. So that's the sequence we might go with those hand grips. But if your child still is finding things difficult and you want to just thicken the pencil for them because maybe their hand is getting tired and sore, then thickening it with something like this triangular grip is a good idea. So it just thickens the pencil and it makes it easier to hold. So there's some of the grips that might work. That can work for a child who might have something like juvenile arthritis and find it hard to hold a pencil. If we thicken it, it's much better for them. But if we take it back even to pre-writing, so when a child is learning how to write, when they're very young, they might hold a pencil like this. And of course, we eventually want them to move to that. So let me show you this little grip we have for very young children, pre-writers. We might use this little ball. And then we're going to go from that type of grip to this type of grip. And you can see how close that is to this later one that you want to develop. So there's a whole host of little grippies in there. Let me show you some other ideas for handwriting because we really need to make it fun. It is very stressful for children. And what I would say is little children who are struggling to write don't need us commenting on how messy their writing is. Look, if we can read it, that's all that matters. Give them loads of praise because they're going to get a lot of little red marks and that's just so disillusioning for a child. So we want to make it fun. So we have a number of these type of products within our collection. These are just fun ways to learn to hold a pencil. So this is a magnetic board and you're getting the child to hold this little pencil using your tripod grip. You can even put some of your grippies on that if you want. And then you can trace it around. Tracing it around and the buttons the little balls follow, and it's quite satisfying because you're getting a lovely pull from each ball, and children quite like how that feels, and you bring it round. So you want to be practicing handwriting in a way that isn't stressful. And another little trick, and this is from this marvelous program called Handwriting Without Tears. Now, Handwriting Without Tears is a great program, and you can get more information on Handwriting Without Tears on the website, but we've taken some of their products to use, and this is the little blackboard. And again, it's a fun way to learn letter formation, because sometimes that's why the children are finding things difficult, is they don't remember how to form the letters. So you take a piece of chalk, and it has to be a small piece of chalk. And the reason why I've made it small, and this is according to the Handwriting Without Tears program, is when it's small, you're forced to hold it with that little tripod grip. You can't do that, and you can't really wrap that. So you have to hold it like that. So it's a nice little practice. And then the first thing we might do, we might get them to write all their letters, and then we realize, maybe it's the letter B or the letter D that they're finding difficult. They might be reversing them. So we might say, okay, we'll do the D here. So I would say, I'll draw it first. My turn first. Let me draw it. Do forgive my writing because it's going to be quite tricky. And down, and a little flick. And what you can do is get the handwriting copies from your child's school and look at how they're forming the letters in the class. So I would draw it first, and then I would say to the child, what I want you to do now is just rub that out. So you're going to wet a little bit of, it might be a bit of cotton wool or whatever it is, and you see the way I'm even squeezing that? That's a little exercise for those muscles I need. So then I get them to wipe it using the same motor pattern as I used to write it myself. So down and up and down and a flick. And then that's one repetition of the letter. And then I get a dry piece. And let's do another. I'd say to the child, well, we need to dry that now. So we start here and round and up and down and a flick. That's a second repetition, hopefully without them even noticing. And then they get to draw it, and at this point they're usually quite excited to draw it, whereas they might usually hate doing letters. And all they have to do is do it in the same pattern. So round and up and down and a flick. And they might even do a few more beside it just to compare. And that's a lovely way of doing letter practice. So we've gone through a lot in our handwriting clip. I've talked to you about the importance of posture and how to sit. I've talked to you about the wrist being a little bit an extension and using the writing slope, and our little seated slope to help with sitting. And we've talked about the handwriting grips and a couple of ideas for how to do the letters themselves. So I want to wish you all the best with your adventures in handwriting. Thank you so much for looking at the clip.